Bills Mafia. On tonight's Air Raid Hour, Dave and I will be joined by Bills beat reporter Alex Brasky of the Batavia Daily. We'll react to Bills Steelers and analyze the countless injuries that have hit the Bills and its potential impact on team performance and roster cutdown decisions. But first,
welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on X at The Bills Guys, joined as always by my co-host, Dave Tilton. You can find him on X at Tilt Money. And as we are every Monday here in the preseason, joined by Batavia Daily Bills beat reporter Alex Brasky. You can find him on X at Alex Brasky. Welcome in, gentlemen, this evening. I was a little late to hit the start button, and I was telling you guys, I was joking with you guys, because I was arguing with people in the Cover One group chat about Ryan Tannehill. That's the point of the preseason that we are at as Bills fans. As always, this show is brought to you by the Cover One Sports Network and Picasso's Pizza. But Alex, thank you so much for joining us again this Monday. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well. Busy times. I'm sure it is for you guys as well, with all these injuries, trying to get up to date, trying to make sure you give the people the accurate information they need, and just certainly a dismal Monday here for the Bills, but hopefully things start to get better as a few players make their way back from injury as well.
Yeah, that's what one of the things I'm excited about. And Dave, have you had a chance? I know it took me a solid maybe 45 minutes yesterday to wrap my head around all these injuries. Have you had a chance to sort of wrap your head around the Buffalo Bills injury list the past couple of days?
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because like through the Steelers game, right, there wasn't a ton that happened on the field that was noticeable, at least in my eye. And then you kind of start to hear about these things after the fact, and then you kind of get some information about, oh, this guy's had an injury and that's why he, maybe didn't play in this game, for example. And then you start to kind of try to backtrack a little bit and be like, okay, well, when did this injury happen? How long has this guy been resting? And you start to kind of try to put these timelines together. And obviously outside of the Matt Milano injury, which we already know is going to be put him out into December at the earliest, it seems like a lot of these other ones are in that sort of 2 to 4 to 6 week variety. And it's kind of the race against the clock for week one now at this point, I think, right? We've already heard today that starters aren't going to play in the last preseason game. So I do think that it certainly seems like the focus of these next couple of weeks will be trying to get as many of these sort of like week to week type situations resolved before week one.
Yeah, one of the things that you can't expect from us tonight is a Bills Panthers preseason preview. That will not be happening. There's absolutely nothing.
A lot of running
preview we're talking about. Maybe bring back the old Rex Ryan like wishbone for that football game at some point. But I think the goal for us this evening is to go sort of position group by position group and discuss the impact of the injuries to the Buffalo Bills roster, because I think the injuries can be seen in two different spectrums. And the first is, how will this impact the Buffalo Bills play on the field? How is this going to affect the Buffalo Bills when the bullets are real in week one? And then the second question we have to ask ourselves with some of these injuries is, how is this going to impact the Buffalo Bills 53-man roster decisions come August 27th? Because the Bills might have to go heavier at one position than another, because guys are going to miss a few weeks. There are guys who are on the bubble who maybe this affects their ability to make the football team. There's a number of different ways that we can look at these injuries. And I want to start with the wide receiver position. And there are two injuries to what is already a thin wide receiver group. The news today is that Curtis Samuel has not been really veteran resting. He is dealing with turf toe, and that is a week-to-week injury. And that is something that historically in a lot of players has lingered and been sort of a season-long injury, or things that have affected them over a long period of time. So some concerning news today about Curtis Samuel. And then obviously in the Steelers game, Marquez Valdez-Scantling sprained his neck. he is also dubbed by the Buffalo Bills to be week to week. I want to start with Curtis Samuel because he is the one injury that I think impacts the Bills the most on the football field. This could potentially, as I mentioned before, if it lingers, be a back-breaking type of injury for this Buffalo Bills offense. Not only does Samuel appear poised for a huge role, his speed and his versatility has been highlighted many times in training camp. Things like the motion and the pre-snap movement, lining up in the backfield as a running back, all those various different things that he brings to this offense. Not to mention, this is really just not a position where the Bills have a lot of relevant depth. They can't afford to lose any of these top 4 guys. Alex, what was your reaction to the announcement of this turf toe injury for Curtis Samuel today?
Yeah, I think you said it all right there. Just a key piece to this offense. All he can do, running it out of the backfield, lining up at various positions at wide receiver. I called him the X factor for this offense during the preseason and training camp. The way that they were using him, the way that they were moving him around. But to go out with this turf toe injury, certainly disappointing, albeit Sean McDermott did term it week to week. And in Sean McDermott, week to week isn't as bad as multiple weeks, as Marquez Valdez-Scantling was termed with that neck injury. So there is hope that Samuel can be back sooner rather than later. And with a few weeks to go until that home opener, season opener against the Arizona Cardinals, there's hope that Samuel can come back for week 1. This toe injury, this is something that he's dealt with before. And like you said, it is something that can linger. But the week-to-week term that Sean McDermott put on it certainly makes me a little bit more optimistic than I would be if he looped Samuel into the multiple weeks category with Marquez Valdez-Scantling and a few others that I'm sure we'll discuss. But you look at Samuel and you look at Marquez Valdez-Scantling, 2 of very few receivers that were kind of quote-unquote sure things in terms of what they've proven at the NFL level. You have a Mac Hollins who's only had 1 productive season. You have Keon Coleman who has yet to acclimate to the NFL level completely. So you were really counting on Samuel's veteran experience and that production that he's put out there year after year to come in here and help lead this Bills offense. And being without him the past several days and moving forward, certainly a concern for the Bills.
Dave, the MVS news also affects the Buffalo Bills 53-man roster decisions in a multitude of ways. He was in competition for the number 5 spot, and with only 2 IR designations that the Buffalo Bills can put on guys to bring them back, you really don't want to waste one of those 2 designations on your wide receiver 5. So maybe cutting a guy like Reed Ferguson could be an option for the Buffalo Bills, letting him sit in the parking lot and then bringing him back so they can IR a guy like MVS once the season starts, like after, and not use one of those 2 on him. Maybe even just cutting their losses on a guy like MVS and waiving him with an injury settlement. The Bills could have to go heavy with the Tyrell Shavers. They could have to carry KJ Hamler too with the Curtis Samuel injury. Just so many ramifications for the depth of this Buffalo Bills wide receiver core. What are your thoughts on the MVS injury and the way the depth competition could be affected here?
Yeah, it's interesting because Alex made a great point about how McDermott used different language with that injury as compared to Curtis Samuel. And you start to look at the beginning of the season schedule, right? And the Bills open with Arizona, which is a game that, yes, you want to be ready to go week 1. You want to have all hands on deck week 1. Could the Bills feel like maybe that's a game that they could potentially win without Curtis Samuel or MVS? Maybe so. But then you look at the Dolphins or the Thursday night game following that, and then the Bills have a little bit of that sort of mini bye early in the season. So I'm just kind of looking at those first 2 games as kind of the key timeline here, right? Is can these guys maybe be back in time after that sort of little mini bye at the beginning of the season, after that Thursday game where they can kind of get those extra couple of days, and then you start to look at week 3 as a potential return maybe for a guy like MVS who has been dubbed multiple weeks. That's going to put him out at like 5 to 6 weeks from now, right? And then that timeline, with the turf toe with Curtis Samuel, maybe that gives him enough time to come back and be as close to 100% as he's going to be. Now, this is an interesting one because you don't really know if that's going to end up ever being 100% at this point this year, but he was a key he's expected to be a key contributor. He was their marquee free agent signing, regardless of what you think about what they drafted Keon Coleman. And I get that. Curtis Samuel was their marquee free agent signing before the draft. So they are expecting big things out of him this year to kind of, bridge that gap in a life without Stephon Diggs, right? So the Bills, now you start to look at sort of the personnel mix, and it's going to be, you would think, a lot of double tight ends, Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid. Keon Coleman's going to have to contribute maybe earlier in a more meaningful way than expected. And Khalil Shakir becomes a focal point, right, as well. So the cupboard's not bare, but the depth is going to be tested. And I think the Bills are they're going to be under some stress here in these next couple weeks to see if these guys can get back by week 1.
Alex, Curtis Samuel possibly, like I said, having that turf toe injury, maybe the Buffalo Bills get to week 1, the Arizona Cardinals, and they're like, yeah, we could throw him out there, but he's only going to be, 60%. We really don't want to throw him out in the field. And then you have that short week and he's still not ready. Like, there could be a situation where maybe Curtis Samuel isn't ready to be on the football field until the Buffalo Bills play their 3rd regular season game. What kind of opportunity does this create for a KJ Hamler who could maybe not fill the Curtis Samuel role, but in a niche way, go out there and do some of the things that Curtis Samuel does? And I want to throw another name out there that's not currently on the Bills roster. He's on another NFL roster that if he gets cut, I think the Buffalo Bills might have some interest in at least bringing onto the practice squad and having as an option. And that's New York Giants wide receiver Isaiah McKenzie, who's on the roster bubble there. Do you think a guy like KJ Hamler has an opportunity here? And do you think it's possible the Bills could look to go outside the organization and add another wide receiver before week 1?
Yeah, I think if Samuel's out extended time, perhaps you see Hamler come in and take advantage of an opportunity. But another name that's kind of been counted out, he was a hot name last year during training camp in the preseason, Andy Isabella has been coming on as of late, getting increased reps during practice. And that leads me to believe, no, I don't think that they would go out and peruse the free agent market. I think with a Hamler and Isabella, who's certainly coming on, like I said, increased repetitions in recent weeks, I think they'd look to turn there first and foremost. But like I said, I'm not sold on Samuel's injury being long-term, and I'm not sure he's an IR candidate at this point, at least. Remember, he was originally termed with general soreness when he first missed practice. So I think it was always believed to be a minor injury, maybe just something, like you said, that's lingering a bit. And with a player who has a very lengthy injury history, the Bills may be just playing that one safe during the preseason, not wanting to run him out there and risk that injury lingering even longer. But if Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who I think obviously with that multiple weeks designation from Sean McDermott, I think he has the greater chance to be out for the extended time. And I think it could be Tyrell Shaver's time if Marquez Valdes-Scantling is to miss an extended period. It's already kind of been trending that way. Marquez Valdes-Scantling has been very unreliable throughout training camp and the offseason training program, while Tyrell Shavers just continues to make plays. And he also possesses more special teams capability than Marquez Valdes-Scantling at this stage of his career. So I think if you see MVS go out for an extended time, it's Tyrell Shavers' time. I think if you see Curtis Samuel miss some time, maybe they turn to a Hamler or perhaps an Andy Isabella to bring in, maybe if they need a quick spell for Samuel.
We got Fluffy Panda coming in. He says, guys, we're overthinking this. It's easy fix. Just sign Andre Reed and Eric Molds. Boom. I always appreciate the super chats there, Fluffy. Thank you so much. But
hey, Ryan Tannehill could play wide receiver still, maybe?
Yeah, Texas A&M, he played wide receiver. Moving now to the linebacking position, Matt Milano obviously is the big injury that has broken since we last aired. He's got the torn bicep. He's guaranteed to go on injured reserve and likely be one of those guys designated to return. Nicholas Morrow should be returning in like walkthrough duty this week from his core/groin injury. And then Baylon Spector week to week with his calf injury. Starters appear to be set in Terrell Bernard and Dorian Williams. No one really has seemingly knocked on Dorian Williams' door, at least yet, guys like Deion Jones, etc. But with Williams, you have the issue, and guys like Eric and Anth have pointed this out in the film room. His instincts dropping into coverage are still improving, and they are not the greatest. The Bills, it seems like, really need Cole Bishop and Mike Edwards to get healthy, because those are the guys that the Buffalo Bills might really need a ton in those dime looks that they utilized last year when Milano went down, to mask, again, the loss of Matt Milano. Dave, where's your concern level here with not only Dorian Williams having to start, but the Bills not even having the healthy safeties to go throughout that dime look that they had so much success with last year?
Yeah, I think ultimately you're not going to replace Milano, right? You're hoping that Dorian Williams takes a step forward and will continue to improve. And I think the reps he got last year in live game action hopefully went a long way to that. And obviously he's getting reps now. And in a way, right, for this to happen, I guess earlier, better than later, right? Because it gives him now a couple weeks as well to get those reps next to Bernard and get all these practices under his belt. I, I'm I don't want to say I'm less concerned with the linebacking group, but I've just kind of now accepted the fate of the Matt Milano situation, right? And we just kind of have to move on from that. The safeties are kind of in that group that we just mentioned with like MBS and Curtis Samuel, right? The race to week one. Can these guys get ready? Can they be back in time for week one? Because that would be a big boom, right? To getting a few of these guys back, kind of helping on the back end, sort of having Dorian Williams in the middle of that defense, having the experienced line in front of him, and then those guys on the back end behind him, I'm sure would be a big plus for him. But I think my level of concern is really sort of the same as it was a week ago around the safety room, right? That's where I really want to see the improvement in from a health perspective in these next couple weeks. Cole Bishop being the biggest wild card, and obviously Mike Edwards has the soft tissue injury, which you just don't know with those types of things if that would continue to linger on. But I do think that when the Bills signed Mike Edwards, they probably had intention of him being a starter week one when they signed him. Now with the Milano injury, you would maybe expect that once those guys get healthy, they would have some three safety looks with Rapp, Edwards, and Bishop all on the field at the same time. But again, it just comes down to now the race to week one. Can these guys get ready in time?
Alex, I really want to hear your thoughts on Joe Andreessen, because he was really the story of Bills Steelers. He was all over the field. He played 3 quarters. Nobody knew he was going to start. He had 12 tackles. He just looked like he belonged, even though he was an undrafted tryout player for the Buffalo Bills just a couple of months ago. What's that like as a beat reporter, being on the ground there in Pittsburgh, getting to cover that story in person and getting to see the way Joe Andreessen balled out? And what do you think his chances are of cracking the 53-man roster now with all of the injuries that the Buffalo Bills are dealing with at linebacker?
Yeah, with the way that the Bills preseason has gone, they have yet to score a touchdown. So as a reporter, you're just looking for any semblance of something to write about. And certainly Joe Andreessen gave us all a lot to write about this past Saturday. He really performed at all levels. Chasing Justin Fields down in open field might have been his most impressive play. He was also where he needed to be in coverage and provided some pressure as well. 12 tackles, 2 for a loss in his first start, playing against a lot of first teamers. And the Steelers played their quarterbacks, their 2 competing for the starting job, Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. They played those guys the entire game. So it wasn't like there was slop on the field, although it did look like it from the Steelers. But Joe Andreessen, really, really impressive. Sean McDermott asked today if he's been trained at both positions, and he says they have indeed trained him both as will linebacker and middle linebacker. I think better suited maybe for that middle linebacker role, but who knows, with the thinness at the position, maybe you see him get an opportunity out there at will this week against the Carolina Panthers just to see what he has. You have Moreau coming back, going to be limited in practice this week. Deion Jones, like you said, really hasn't shown much. I think Andreessen, the way that he performed against the Steelers, I think it'd be hard for the Bills to keep him off the roster at this point. A young player, seemingly capable, like I said, at all three levels of the defense, up front at the line of scrimmage, in the secondary, and then out in the open field. So I tweeted the other day, how can you keep this guy off the roster? I stand by that. A lot of it has to do with the fact that Nicholas Moreau has shown nothing and Deion Jones has shown very little when he's been out there. Two other players that are going to be limited that you talked about, Cole Bishop and Mike Edwards, starting to ramp things back up this week. So that's obviously a good sign. And just a tough break for Damar Hamlin, who appeared really ready to take on a starting role to start the season, but that hamstring injury that's going to have him week to week now, that could end things for Damar Hamlin in terms of his opportunity to be a starter. However, you don't know how long it's going to take Edwards and Bishop to come back. It's kind of going to be a race to see which of those three can return from their respective injuries soonest.
Yeah, the linebacker position is just absolutely wild right now. And thank you for pointing out that he has worked at both Will and worked at Mike linebacker, because that's something super interesting to think about. The Matt Milano injury is serious. Like, you're not going to get Matt Milano till December. And like, the Buffalo Bills could get to a situation, and I'm not saying they're going to do this, because this is probably the last case scenario, the worst case scenario for the Buffalo Bills, the last thing they want to do. If they feel like Joe Andreessen might be the best player to put out there because Dorian Williams is struggling and none of those veterans have shown anything, maybe we get to a point in the regular season where Joe Andreessen becomes the middle linebacker and Terrell Bernard is moved into that Matt Milano role. I doubt it, because I don't think the Buffalo Bills want to move the guy out of where they see him and his position for the significant future of this football team and his position when Matt Milano comes back. But when you're a competing football team, desperate times could call for desperate measures. Dave, what do you think about this super chat here from Fluffy Panda, where he says, is it unfair to have the injury prone talk about Matt Milano? It seems like we've been here before at middle linebacker, which really affects our much weaker secondary. And I would say not much weaker secondary. I would say much weaker safety spot, because the corners have looked pretty good.
Just quickly, the quote about him being trained at both. He was trained at both. They said that they moved him strictly to middle a couple of weeks ago. So not sure if they'd be willing to maybe give him an opportunity going back, but they did say Sean McDermott did add a little bit more to that quote, moving him strictly to middle during practice a couple of weeks ago.
Dave, what are your thoughts on the injury prone label for Matt Milano?
That one's hard for me, because I think the injury last year, I mean, that was nothing that, I mean, it was a freak injury, right? The broken bone. I mean, like, I can't call that being injury prone. The bicep thing, it was unfortunate, right? I feel almost like I would be disrespecting a player like Matt Milano if I started calling him injury prone. I do think that there are players that are more prone to like soft tissue injuries lingering longer than other players, right? Like, I think that's just different bodies recover, differently. But the cause of an injury, I think in this case, I don't think you can pin that on him and say that he's injury prone because of that.
Taking a look at actually one more thing on the linebacker spot too. This is where it gets super interesting. I'm really hoping the Buffalo Bills decide to go with the youth at linebacker come cut down day. They have some interesting decisions to make. Nicholas Moreau will probably be deemed healthy by the time August 27th rolls around. I wouldn't mind cutting him. He's a veteran. Deion Jones, 13 snaps on special teams. He's probably going to have to prove something on special teams to make this roster. I wouldn't mind cutting him, because I feel like we can probably get both of those guys on the practice squad. Joe Andreessen has flashed in this preseason. I don't want to risk him to waivers. Adafon Ulofoshio is a promising 5th-round pick. I don't want to subject him to waivers. If we're going to subject any of them to waivers, I'd rather it be the injury prone Balon Spector. But then again, he could be healthy by the time the season rolls around. And the Bills have shown that they really like him, as he was rolling with the 2s for the most of the summer. So it'll be really interesting to see how the 53-man shakes out at the linebacker position. But I really do hope the Buffalo Bills choose youth over some of these veterans who looks like they probably lost a step over the course of the past couple of seasons. But the safety position, we've already talked about it a little bit. Damar Hamlin week to week with a hamstring, Cole Bishop week to week with a shoulder, Mike Edwards week to week with a hamstring. Both of those guys are going to start to do like individual walkthrough stuff this week. And Alex, you can speak on that in a moment, but just an absolute mash unit at safety. It's looking like Cam Lewis could be the starter at free safety opposite Taylor Rapp week 1. If Bishop and Edwards are still struggling to come back, if Hamlin doesn't improve significantly, there could be a situation where like Kareem Jackson's our number 1 reserve safety / dime backer week 1 of the season as sort of that stopgap option. The Buffalo Bills need bodies back in a big way at safety. And this is a big opportunity, Alex, for Cam Lewis.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it's going to be a race to see who can come back between Mike Edwards, Cole Bishop, and Damar Hamlin. But yeah, Cam Lewis has moved into that safety spot behind Damar Hamlin in practices as of late, and now taking over for Hamlin after he exited Thursday's joint practice with the Steelers. Lewis has been around in the system. He's a player that the Bills obviously trust in his versatility, moving back and forth from cornerback to safety. That's obviously something else that plays in his favor. So it's just a matter of him kind of taking the bull by the horns, maybe this week against the Panthers and moving forward if he must. Now, I spoke with Dr. Kyle Trimble of Banged Up Bills on our podcast right here, right now. He said that Bishop is trending in the right direction in terms of the injury that was maybe rumored out there, that shoulder injury that is sustained, and that timeline is trending toward being complete. So it looks like he could be ready by the start of the regular season. Mike Edwards, like you said, Dave, they definitely brought him in to be a starter. That soft tissue injury gives me a little bit more pause if he'll be back by the start of the regular season. But yeah, they need bodies back in a big way. I don't think Kareem Jackson or Terrell Burgess are the answer. And Cam Lewis, while he's a good story and a loyal soldier for the team, I think he's much more suited in a reserve role than a starting role. You really need Edwards and Bishop back sooner rather than later, or at the very least Hamlin to take you through a few weeks until you get those two guys back.
Yeah, if these safeties take a while to come back, I think you could see some surprises on the 53-man roster, some dominoes. Like Terrell Burgess has been a pretty good special teamer his entire career, just like Cam Lewis has been a pretty good special teamer for the Buffalo Bills his whole career. So if Cam Lewis is in the starting lineup and those safeties aren't ready, you could see a guy like Terrell Burgess snag a roster spot simply to play teams until Cam Lewis can return back to those units when he no longer has starting responsibilities. So keep an eye out for that. Everybody's favorite position, seemingly on social media, backup quarterback. Let's talk backup quarterback here for a little bit. Shane Buechele obviously had the season-ending neck injury. The Buffalo Bills will at some point probably reach an injury settlement with him, or he'll come back with the team next off season. Mitch Trubisky, pretty significant knee injury. He's going to miss multiple weeks. He is an IR designate to return candidate. And that leaves the cupboard pretty thin for the Buffalo Bills at backup quarterback. You got Ben DiNucci, who they signed last week, and Anthony Brown, who they are going to sign either tonight or tomorrow morning to be the Matt Leinart / Jordan Palmer / Vince Young thrown in the fourth quarter of our final preseason game. Don't expect much of a future for a guy like Anthony Brown, but where do the Buffalo Bills go from here at backup quarterback while they wait out Mitch Trubisky's injury? Like, is it Ben DiNucci's job to lose this week? Do they give Kyle Allen a call when he likely gets cut by the Pittsburgh Steelers on August 27th? Do they, have Josh Allen shoot out a text to his golfing buddy, Matt Barkley? Or do the Buffalo Bills consider looking at the trade market or a guy like Ryan Tannehill? Dave, I'm going to start with you. Like, you're prognosticating where the Buffalo Bills head is at right now. What do you think they are going to do at the backup quarterback position?
I mean, if it was me, I think the logical answer would be you wait out and see if Kyle Allen gets cut from the Pittsburgh Steelers, if Trubisky's going to be out for an extended period of time, right? Like, I don't think it would be wise for the Bills to go into the season with Ben DiNucci as the backup quarterback. I mean, I think we all realize like Ben DiNucci was brought in like largely to hand the ball off 30 times in these preseason games, right? Because the Bills needed someone.
The ball's on him to sidearm throw his first throw of the preseason.
And I would expect the Bills will probably Now, I don't know, but I would expect they will probably have a similar game plan in quotations, because they're not really game planning, or they're going to hand the ball off 30, 40 times against the Carolina Panthers would be my expectation. But to me, I think if Trubisky's out for an extended period of time, I think you see what happens with the Steelers and Kyle Allen. And if Kyle Allen gets cut, I think that the Bills could probably sell him on coming back to be the backup if Mitch Trubisky's going to be out for an extended period of time. Outside of that, I'm not really I'm not the type of guy who will just because Ryan Tannehill is a free agent. I don't really think that makes a ton of sense for the Bills to do. I think for them, the backup quarterback position, they haven't really invested in it in the Josh Allen era, to the extent that maybe some people would have hoped, either through a developmental draft pick, whatever. They just haven't shown that they're willing to kind of really invest in the backup. Well, the most they probably invested was the first time they signed Mitch Trubisky, right? And they gave him $2.5 million or something for 1 year.
From a little bit, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. But until they show me that they really truly want to have one of those type of Chase Daniel type backups like the Chiefs did for a while, or something like that, then I'm just going to assume it's going to be a guy that's been familiar with them, or they tap Matt Barkley. But to me, if that's what we're talking about, then that's not a good topic of conversation. So.
I do feel like every year, me and you we do an entire segment of at least one of our shows where we talk about mid-round quarterbacks that we like, that we know the Buffalo Bills will probably never touch in the NFL draft, and year after year they don't. Maybe next year when they have 1,500 draft picks, they might consider a quarterback in the middle rounds. But I digress. Alex, where do you think the Buffalo Bills go from here? What is the plan at backup quarterback, and what do you think they do with Mitch Trubisky? Is it IR designate to return? Is it maybe the cut Reed Ferguson or Deion Jones, let them sit in the parking lot, and then IR Mitch Trubisky on the 28th? Do you think he's headed to IR with his knee injury, and what's the plan to replace him?
I think it could be trending that way. I think Kyle Allen is certainly the top candidate to come in here. I think he's probably due to be released by the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it's really been a revolving door of Josh Allen's buddies in that QB2 situation with the Bills. So I think signs certainly could point toward Allen coming back. And I'm one, I know that you're not very high on it, that is kind of thought about them bringing in a Ryan Tannehill. I know it's not likely. I know he's probably looking for a better chance to contribute and probably for a relatively hefty payday for a backup quarterback. But yeah. I think if you're the Bills, you at least have to check it out. Mitch Trubisky has looked absolutely atrocious through 2 games. You wish him well with this injury, but before the injury was sustained, he left plenty to be desired. Really didn't offer anything in terms of throwing the football, just holding on to it far too long, missing receivers down the field. I'm not sure if the Bills have any confidence in him. I'm not sure how you could have any confidence in him as your backup quarterback. I think you have to look to improve there. If Josh Allen goes down for 5-6 weeks, the season is pretty much lost. But 1 or 2 weeks, you need somebody to step in and fill those shoes, especially with the way the division is going to be this year. The Jets and the Dolphins both nipping at the Bills' heels. 1 game, 2 games could decide this division. And if you lose Josh Allen, I know that he's been pretty reliable in terms of his availability over the years. But I think you need to look to improve at that QB2 position, but at the same time, I'm not sure that they will. I think they're more apt to go to a Kyle Allen or Matt Barkley in this situation.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I know that I'm very vocally on social media, Ryan Tannehill's not going to happen, but I would sleep a lot better at night if Ryan Tannehill was our backup quarterback, because I do think he's the best option on the market of all the options, right? You mentioned, if Josh Allen, has to miss a week because she's in concussion protocol, or Josh Allen leaves in the middle of the third quarter and we need a quarterback to close out the game, of all the options out there, Ryan Tannehill is the most reassuring. He's the one that makes me feel most confident. But if you're Ryan Tannehill, why are you coming here for that? You're waiting for a starter to go down. You're waiting for a team to offer you $6 to $8 million to close out their season for them. That's what you're waiting. You're waiting for a quarterback who everyone thought was going to be like a good quarterback to fall flat in his face. That's what you're looking for, I think, if you're Ryan Tannehill, is an opportunity to play, an opportunity to get paid. And I don't think either of those opportunities are available for him in Buffalo unless something that I'm not even going to mention happens, because I do not even want to put that out into the stratosphere. But Alex, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It is a pleasure as always. Tell the people where they can find your work, because I know you did something very similar to us this evening, and I think people should check it out, where you sat down with one of our guys here at Cover One, not one of our guys, but affiliated with us, Dr. Kyle Trimble, and you just did a podcast with him. And tell the people where they can find that and they can find your work.
Yeah, you can find the Right Here, Right Now podcast on YouTube, the Batavia Daily News YouTube channel, or just search Right Here, Right Now, our full playlist on that channel. Also, anywhere you find your podcast, Spotify, Apple. Also, at Alex Brasky on social media, and Dr. Kyle Trimble did a great job breaking down the Bills' injuries, much better job than I could from a medical standpoint, and gave some perspective and some timelines on some players. May lessen the worries of Bills fans out there. And just want to leave them with this. The Bills do still have Josh Allen. He's the most important player on the roster. He's been carrying this team for how many years now? He is still around. So when you have Josh Allen, you're always going to have a chance. That remains the case. I wouldn't hit the panic button just yet, but it certainly is concerning the amount of injuries that are building up.
Thank you so much for joining us as always.
Thank you.
Always appreciate you. You'll be joining us one more time, I believe, next week, if you're available. And then you got your own things to worry about once the regular season starts. So Thank you so much for joining us, Alex, and see you again next week.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Always enjoy Alex joining us. Before we get into our next segment, this show is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza. 4 great locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo Pizza since 1980. You can order online at picassospizza.net. And if you're an out-of-towner just like us, you can even get it mailed to your home. And we can tell you from experience, it is just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, that is picassospizza.net. Head on over there right now, right? And order your Picasso's Pizza to be delivered. So when you have to sit there and watch third string players all day on Saturday against the Carolina Panthers, at least you can do it with the best pizza in Buffalo, Picasso's Pizza. So picassospizza.net, head on over there and get your tailgating and your game time needs. So Dave, some other impactful injuries we haven't had a chance to talk about yet. The one that's, again, there are a lot of injuries that are disheartening, but personally for me, one of my favorite just stories on the Buffalo Bills for the last couple of years has been third string tight end Quintin Morris. Big fan of the guy. And it really looked like over the course of that Steelers game, between special teams and plays he was making on the field on offense, he was really securing that number 3 job from Zach Davidson, who was making it difficult for him to do so. But then he goes down with a shoulder injury. Sean McDermott labels it an injury that's going to be multiple weeks. I'm really hoping that the Buffalo Bills can find a way to, again, have a guy, a veteran like a Reed Ferguson, sit in the parking lot, IR designate a guy like Quintin Morris. There's a ton of guys right now, so they have some decisions to make, and that Quintin Morris can have a chance to come back on this roster in a month or a month and a half, whenever he is ready, whenever he is healed, to be this third tight end. Because if a guy like Kincaid or a guy like Knox goes down, I'd really like to have him with the flashes he has been showing, both as a blocker and as a receiver and a special teams player. But I also have that sort of like sick feeling in my gut that like the numbers game, they might just have to IR him and redshirt him, and we won't see him again until next training camp. And that is if they can work out a contract with him, because I know he might be some variance of a restricted free agent next offseason. What are your thoughts on the whole Quintin Morris situation? I know it seems like probably a lock now that Zach Davidson makes the roster.
Well, the thing is with all these injuries, right, is in a way, you almost wish they weren't all kind of on the same timeline, because with them all being on the same timeline, it's really putting the Bills in a difficult position when it comes to the roster cut downs, right? Because there's only so many buttons you can press if you're Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, as far as like the guy waiting in the parking lot. You only have so many slots to have a designated to return player. And you're sitting here now with 6 to 8 to 10 guys who are on this sort of week to week injury list. So what you hope to see happen, right, over the next couple weeks, or really over the next week, is that you get some guys that progress quicker than others, and maybe you get a little bit more clarity on some of the other guys who aren't progressing maybe as quickly, in the sense that, okay, we're going to take an assessment at the end of this week, see how we're looking going into the Panthers game. Coming out of that Panthers game, if we feel like a guy like Quintin Morris is more weeks away than days away, then maybe he does go to IR, right, for the season. And the Bills just have to say, like, Zach Davidson's going to be our tight end 3 this year. I'm definitely more open to stomaching something like that than potentially like wasting, let's say, an IR to return spot on let's say an MVS or someone like that, where the Bills maybe are just better off putting him on the active roster and using their IR to return spot on someone else, like a Cole Bishop, right, if he's not ready, or something of that nature. Because, like I said, there's only so many levers they can pull, and with the timelines all kind of at this point looking similarly for these guys that are injured, that's really tough for the Bills. So if it's an IR for the season for Quintin Morris, I'll be sad for him, but it will give Zach Davidson a chance. And I don't think the Bills will really be that worse off with Zach Davidson as a tight end 3. They're going to feel it mostly on special teams.
Yeah, special teams, and then I think just like the blocking ability. I don't know how much of a blocker Zach Davidson is. That's where they'll feel it. But yeah, it just stinks when you have to start weighing that. You're like, man, Quintin Morris is a dude on this team who will play a role on this team, who we want on this team.
Yep.
But like, you might have to make a decision that you don't want to make because you have to weigh him against other guys at other positions. So just really unfortunate for him there. At edge, Casey Toohill might be back at practice this week, and if he is, maybe he gets a lot of run this week against the Panthers as a chance to prove himself, to like maybe get a shot to be one of those veteran practice squad guys. But I mean, he has been out of practice since August 8th. We haven't really seen a lot of him with his injury. Javon Solomon hurt a calf, but Sean McDermott said he should be good for week 1. But that is really interesting now. Like, you got Javon Solomon in his calf injury, and Javon Solomon has played well in this preseason. He's shown flashes this preseason, but another guy who has played well this preseason and shown flashes this preseason and made the roster last year and is not hurt is Kingsley Jonathan. Javon Solomon versus Kingsley Jonathan is going to be a super, super interesting position battle, because like I think there can only be one. Like, that's gonna be one of the ones that stings come August 27th.
It's gonna sting. I think that you hope that you take Sean McDermott for his word that Solomon will start ramping back up, and that he truly will be ready for week 1, because I have been impressed with Kingsley Jonathan's play during the preseason, but you just hope, because he's previously been on the Bills practice squad, obviously, but he made the team a year ago, that you can get him back on the practice squad, right? He is an ideal candidate for a call up if you need it, if something goes wrong. I think that's kind of how I would see it playing out. Solomon on the team, try to get Jonathan down to the practice squad. Toohill at this point, like, I think he's just going to be He's going to be cut. When it comes down to it, I mean, he just hasn't been able to, really work his way back and really make any kind of impression, I think, to give himself a chance at a roster spot, especially when, I mean, the writing was somewhat on the wall when the Bills signed Dwayne Smoot, well into free agency. So that one's not going to be really hard to stomach. It's going to happen probably most likely. And it's just going to be a matter of, can Solomon really ramp back up this week and show the coaching staff that he's ready to go before cutdown day.
The last injury that could have some ramifications on the 53-man roster on cutdown day is Austin Johnson. He limped off with that calf injury. Again, Sean McDermott said he should be good week 1, but like, the Buffalo Bills could have been leaning towards keeping 4 DTs, and now Austin Johnson's got the calf. Maybe they'll want to keep a 5th one to start the season. And now Deshaun Williams makes the team when you were going to try to practice squad Deshaun Williams, and now that affects someone else on the roster. So Austin Johnson could have a ramification on the way the Buffalo Bills construct their 53 with this minor calf injury that he is dealing with.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there was I think in my pre-camp 53, I had 5 defensive tackles, so it wouldn't shock me if If he was just
if you lose Williams, I feel like Anku will go to the practice squad, and you can call Anku up for a week and then have like Austin Johnson week 2 or week 3 whenever he's ready to come back.
Yeah, and again, I'm not so concerned with this one. Similar
Mhm.
to Solomon, it sounds like he's going to ramp back up this week, and like part of me is also hoping that the Bills have just been like extra precautionary with some of these, just given some of the other sort of more longer term injuries they've battled since the start of camp, like a Cole Bishop, like a Mike Edwards. And now, just seeing what's happened with Milano, like if you're the Bills, like you almost are like just trying to tiptoe in a way through these last, 2 weeks before the season starts, that you just don't have anything significant pop up in that. You just, even if these guys aren't 100%, you want them to be at the start of the season. We know over the course of the season, guys get nicked up and they play through it. You like them to be 100 at the beginning, but even if they're not, but they're still, 90% and good to go, then I think Sean McDermott would take that right now.
Taking a look at just some of the takeaways from that Steelers game, which outside the 4 injuries that were revealed sort of after the game, that was like one of the most like non-offensive preseason games I've ever seen in my life. Like I just watched it calmly, coolly, collectively. Like nothing really triggered me other than apparently like, Mitch went down and Austin went down and MVS went down. And like some of those things that didn't really like click until sort of like, as the game was over and as the game was progressing. But like as the game was going on there, I know we haven't scored a touchdown yet this preseason, but there were some encouraging things. I really like our cornerback depth. Like obviously Douglas and Benford look like they're the ingrained starters, but Kyrie Elam looks good. A guy who could possibly be a 2025 starter at corner with Douglas as a UFA, a guy who, if someone gets hurt, could step in. And then Jamarcus Ingram looking really encouraging on special teams, his inside outside versatility, making some plays, sort of that next in line of that UDFA guy who's been in the system for years. And Daquan Hardy as a corner, and we'll talk about his special teams ability in a minute, looked good as well. Like Ingram and Hardy appear to be locking themselves into roster spots. Safety is a question mark, but cornerback depth might be the most feel good position on the football team outside of just QB1 and tight
Look,
end.
I know the Steelers didn't have a murderer's row of weapons out there during this game, but as Alex pointed out, and as we all saw, they did have Russell Wilson and Justin Fields out there the entire game throwing the rock, right? They didn't have Ben DiNucci on the other side barely throwing the rock. So they threw it, right, with guys that are starters or have been starters in bona fide NFL quarterbacks, and those guys acquitted themselves well. Like the thing that was annoying me the most were the Steelers announcers getting all of our players' names wrong, calling Jamarcus Ingram DeMarcus Ingram, and I was like, his name's Jamarcus, guy. But no, on a serious note, they played well. I like Ingram's tenacity, and I know that's something you've been talking about for a couple years now with him, and also being familiar with him from his UB days. But I also get a sense that like Sean McDermott's kind of like giving Daquan Hardy a bit of tough love. Not so on the defense, but he makes comments like, "Oh, he'll be a better decision maker, this and that." So I think Sean McDermott is almost like coaching Daquan Hardy a little bit harder than maybe he is some of the other guys, because he sees the potential in him, and he's really played pretty well defensively. Almost had the interception, and then he almost had the should have been sack on Justin Fields when he made that kind of miraculous escape. But I've liked his aggressiveness as well, and he's been smart. He's been smart. Like I know he didn't get that sack, but that was one of those where it certainly seemed like he was trying not to like get a penalty on that one. But and then he almost had the pick, right? Playing sort of, I want to say, in front of his hometown or his home fans, but he had a lot of family at the game, right? And a lot of people there watching him. So it was nice to see him rise to the occasion a bit. And like the cornerback room, it seems quite settled, and I am quite happy with it, actually. And didn't even mention Taron Johnson, who's just going to be an absolute stud this year.
Yeah, some of the positives that came out of this game defensively, Taron Johnson's going to be a stud, right? Like Christian Benford looked pretty good as well. Rasul Douglas looked good in that first game. I can't believe it took us 49 minutes to mention this, but Gregory Rousseau, the guy played 2 series. He had 4 tackles, 2.5 sacks, 2 tackles for loss, and 3 quarterback hits. Going into a contract year, getting that 5th-year extension, like I made the joke on social media. You know that Matt Damon gif from Saving Private Ryan, where he goes from Matt Damon, so sort of morphs into that old guy, that gif, that meme. Gregory Rousseau morphing into Julius Peppers before our eyes in the preseason, just showing that arm length and just showing his progression and showing what working with Von Miller for 2 years sort of has done to his game. We've been saying it. We're just, we love Gregory Rousseau as is, but now getting to see him healthy, he has a chance to really break out and make a name for himself in the National Football League this year.
He could really be kind of one of those Lawrence types from the Cowboys, right? That's like that could be who he could become, right? That size, lengthy guy who has the pass rush pop and gets his hand like he at times looks like he's a man amongst boys out there, right? The way that he plays with that length, and like if he's healthy, the Bills would be wise to lock that man up for a multi-year deal if they can get it done. And I think that they will want to get that done. And I think for both sides, I mean, obviously Gregory Rousseau can see the trajectory he has to be the number one guy on at the edge on this defensive line. And he pretty much is already that, right? Like Von Miller is not, I don't think anyone's going to sit here and say, oh, Von Miller's like he's the number one paid guy, but he's not the number one guy. That's Gregory Rousseau.
The running game got back on track against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Always nice to see, even when there's no game planning, your offensive line putting a hat in a hat with the opposing team's defensive line. They get some push, they get some wins. James Cook looked good. Played probably one more series than I would have liked to see James Cook play. Ray Davis came in, just looked absolutely exceptional. I'm really looking forward to that 1-2 punch this year, and Ty Johnson sprinkled in as well. So I think the Bills looking pretty good and have reassured a lot of people when it comes to their ability to run the ball.
Well, what did I say after last week's game? I said like that offensive line needs to show me something, and they had a better game. They had a better game this week, and I know. Look, it was the guys at the end of the roster, but you will still want to see your guys at the end of the roster beating the other team's guys at the end of their roster. And Ray Davis looked shifty. Frank Gore Jr. really ran hard, and he was certainly seizing his moment to try to make the most of it. Long shot to make the team, but I think that he is certainly should be a lock to make the practice squad. I don't think the Bills will just let him go without any intention of bringing him back. And I think that Ray Davis showed last night that when he gets, when he's patient and he gets that sort of first step right, he's going to be an effective runner. And I think that was like almost what, we had hoped Zach Moss will become back, when was that type of style. But he just didn't have the vision. And you could see that Ray Davis has that vision, albeit, against lesser competition. But I think he should be cementing himself as the RB2 at this stage.
I mean, going back to the pre-draft process, we do extensive pre-draft work here on this show. And before Ray Davis was even selected by the Buffalo Bills, we lined his measurables up with Mike Davis, the former Carolina Panther, Atlanta Falcons running back. And we put them side by side at same height, same weight, practically the same 40, same vertical, same broad. Like they're literally the same athlete, right? Ray Davis and Mike Davis share the same last name. And Mike Davis had his best career in the National Football League under Joe Brady in 2020 with the Carolina Panthers. So I really do think that there was some intentionality with that draft pick by the Buffalo Bills. I think a guy like Joe Brady sees a lot of Mike Davis in Ray Davis. And I just think he's gonna be the perfect complement to a James Cook. You got like the shiftier, more finesse James Cook, and you got a bulldozer in Ray Davis who's just gonna lower his shoulder and run right through you. So I really do think that he is just a great counterbalance to James Cook. And I think he's gonna be one of those guys this season where, we get to the end of the season, we're like, man, Ray Davis was, his stats aren't gaudy. They're not crazy. Like they're not out of this world. He didn't rush for 1,000 yards. He didn't usurp James Cook, nothing like that. But it's like, man, he added this element to our offense that really took us to another level. Like just added this element to our game. And I think that's what Ray Davis can bring this year.
Yeah, he can. And I mean, you don't automatically think about this with a guy like Mike Davis, but in 2020, he had 59 receptions for the Carolina Panthers. In
Mm-hmm.
2021, he had 44 receptions for the Carolina Panthers. And years before that, he had a 34 reception season with the Seahawks. So like you don't think about it, but that's another element also that Ray Davis is going to bring to this game. It's not going to be just James Cook as the only pass catching back. Ray Davis can do it all, really. So that is a nice skill set that the Bills have found in Ray Davis. It appears it looks like a really solid pick and a guy that should contribute, right away for this team.
Frank Gore and Darrington Evans looked really good as well. It'll be really interesting to see. The Bills probably only keep one on the practice squad. Right now, Darrington Evans, as Joe Marino likes to point out on Locked On Bills, is the one getting the reps before Frank Gore Jr. That's noteworthy. But last year, Darrington Evans got claimed or got claimed relatively early in the season and made his way to Miami and was off the Buffalo Bills roster. So if a guy like Darrington Evans gets claimed or a guy like Darrington Evans departs early in the season, it could be Frank Gore Jr. who ends up on the Buffalo Bills practice squad, even though my money right now would probably go to a guy like Darrington Evans. Special teams. I want to talk about special teams before we head out of here. A lot of nerves maybe have been calmed based on the way special teams has played this preseason. Tyler Bass has made all of his kicks. That's reassuring. Sam Martin looked like an actual NFL punter and got an opportunity to punt a lot.
Yeah, he had a nice day, actually.
My warped brain theory is that like Sean McDermott started Mitch Trubisky on purpose because he wanted to punt 9 times. Like that's probably why he did it. He's like, nah, Josh, get out of here. I need to see Sam Martin punt. And then Daquan Hardy, outside of that one decision he made to return that punt inside the 5, which he probably made because he was trying to prove something because it's the preseason. He looked comfortable catching the ball. There was no bobbles. He looked comfortable reacting after he caught the ball. He did a good job, making his first move, getting upfield. I really like what I saw to Daquan Hardy. And I think if you're the Buffalo Bills, at least for now, right? At least for now, if he gets some more opportunities against Carolina and screws up, that could change. But at least for now, it looks like the Buffalo Bills have their punt returner in Daquan Hardy.
Yeah, these are great reps for him right now, right? Because yes, he might be trying to prove something, but these are easily coachable fixes, right? That he's going to have a chance to get coached up on some of this around the decision making, and we know that he was an experienced returner in college, so that's certainly going to help calm the nerves a little bit. Obviously, I think that going into camp, we wanted him to kind of take that job and run with it, and it looks like he's closing in on securing those duties. Look, Tyler Bass, like this is the thing with him, right? Like he hasn't really been tested on any long-ish kicks in the preseason, but you want him for these like 20 to 30, mid 30s, maybe low 40s range. Like those got to be automatic if you're Tyler Bass. Like those got to be like 90% make rate, right? For that range. And then like, yes, when it gets up to 50 plus, fine. So in a way, I was kind of like hoping that he would get tested with a few longer ones, but also I could see it from the other side, like drill 3 short ones, get your mentals right, get out of your own head. You've made all your kicks in the preseason, confidence going into the regular season. I hope that against the Panthers that he has at least a chance to maybe try like a high 40s, maybe in the 50s range field goal. And then in the game against the Steelers, when the Steelers announcers was like, surprised Sean McDermott's not going for it. I'm like, I'm not surprised. He's giving Tyler Bass another chance to make a field goal in the preseason, which is more important than Ben DiNucci going for it on a 4th down. Okay. So like to me, that was the right call from a coaching standpoint, because you need to give Tyler Bass those chances in the preseason. So yeah, I was pretty happy with that.
I don't know. I can't remember if I texted our group chat or if I put this in the Cover One chat, but the Steelers announcers are just awful. Like, I mean, that's people get mad about preseason announcers. Like I know Alan Pergament of the Buffalo News had some just awful sexist comment about Maddie Glab that he tweeted out as well. Just who cares? It's the preseason. It's terrible. Put it on mute like everyone else in the world. No one's paying for top-notch graphics. No one's paying for top-notch announcers for games that very few people watch. Preseason games are always going to be hot garbage. That's just the way it is. But I made the comment, Charlie Batch actually looks more athletic now in his 40s than he did when he was a football player. He looked good. I was surprised about Charlie. That was a throw. I forgot Charlie Batch existed until Saturday. But one last thing, and I said this when Alex was on with us, I think there's going to be one 53-man roster surprise, and I think it's going to be special teams related, right? Like if Cam Lewis is your starting free safety week 1 and those other safeties aren't healthy enough to back him up, a guy like Terrell Burgess could make the team because of his special teams value, because Cam Lewis is not going to be playing teams if he's your starting free safety. If MVS is out, right, and Tyrell Shavers has to take on more of a wide receiver type of role, Justin Shorter has been getting a lot of snaps on special teams. He's been leading the Buffalo Bills in special team snaps all preseason, and he was running with the ones for most of training camp as a gunner, right? So we might be counting Justin Shorter out as a receiver, but as a special teamer, I think he provides immense value to the Buffalo Bills. So whether it's Justin Shorter or Terrell Burgess, I think there could be one guy who makes the 53 who are like, whoa, what? Huh? And it's 100% special teams related.
And injury related. It'll depend on the recovery times of these guys. So, man, yeah, I mean, look, I hope that this week we see a lot of progress on some of these.
Mm-hmm.
And look, I think there will still be a lot of precautionary like guys just kind of maybe doing individual stuff or, stretching and that type of thing. But, week 1, we're only like 3 weeks away, right? Give or take. So the clock is ticking for these guys that are week to week to get back.
All right. So we got Bills, Panthers on Saturday. Hopefully nobody gets hurt between now and then in practice. Hopefully no one gets hurt or no one of significance. Hopefully no one gets hurt, but obviously hopefully no one of significance gets hurt against the Carolina Panthers. We're sickos. We'll be watching that game on Saturday. And then we'll be back here on Monday. 53-man roster predictions on Monday coming your way on the 26th, and then the 27th, the Buffalo Bills will actually be making those moves. So we got one more show before roster cutdown. Then we'll have our season preview show, and then we are in football season. And I'll tell you what, our first show of the season, our first post game show, I'm probably not going to be in the best shape because I will be in Buffalo for Bills Cardinals. So I don't know if I've told you that. I have a wedding that weekend. So I will be in Buffalo for Bills Cardinals. And it's going to be interesting to see the condition I'll be in after flying into Buffalo on Friday night, wedding Saturday night. I'm not going to the Bills game because I can't afford that home opener lifestyle. But I will be tailgating a little bit and then watching with my family. And then I'll be flying home Sunday night, going to work on Monday, and then having the show after work. So
let's hope they win, because
I might not be in the greatest of conditions for our first post-game show of the season, but I really do look forward to finally being able to talk some real football. But any final thoughts before we get out of here, Dave?
No, just let's pay attention to these injuries this week, wishing guys speedy recoveries, and let's just hope and pray that most, if not all, of these guys who are week to week are back and good to go by week 1.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comments section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!